Hey everybody, real quick before I get started, I want to tell you guys about something new that I'm trying out. I started a new Discord server. It's called One Mic. There is a link to the Discord in the episode description, and there will continue to be a link in the episode description for all subsequent videos. The reason I want to do this is because I wanted to give us all a space to collectively talk about all of the shows that I'm covering so we don't have to talk across each other in the comments or maybe miss some comments or miss some replies. I think it's a good place for us fans who are fans of the shows that I cover, fans of this channel, whatever that may be, for us all to get together and just kind of like talk about the show. So what I did was I created the server and then I created channels within it for each show that I'm covering at that time. Right now it's set up to cover the, I think, 4 or so shows that I'm covering right now, and then I've added channels for shows that I'm going to be covering in the month of December that I know for sure. And then as I'm covering shows will cycle in and out. So like once I'm done covering a show, a channel will be deleted, and then once I start covering a show, a new channel will be added. So check out that Discord. I look forward to talking to you guys, and now let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about episode 5 of the FX and Hulu limited series Fleishman is in Trouble, entitled Vantablack. Actually, episode title is based on an exhibit. Actually, it's not based on an exhibit. It's featured in an exhibit in this episode, but the exhibit is at the American Museum of Natural History. Toby almost goes to it, and he eventually takes the kids to it, but Vantablack is a lab-made shade of black that is considered to be the darkest black in existence. It's made for military purposes, and it's considered to be the closest physical manifestation to a void. To a space void, as in like it's close to what is called a void. Not it is a physical manifestation of something that is meant to be avoided. So after explaining that, which I'm sure none of you needed, let me give you a real quick kind of like brief synopsis of my process. I watch an episode, and when I'm taking notes, I only take notes on what's happening. Like, I don't try to analyze it. I don't think about it. I just take notes on what's happening. Then when I sit down to do these videos, I organize my notes, which is why you see me looking off to the screen over here. This is where I keep my notes. And these are the notes that I organize for what I want to talk about, the order I want to talk about it, all that good stuff. When I'm taking my notes from my phone, which is where I put my notes while I'm watching an episode, and when I'm putting them into a format for me to not read from, but for me to look at while I'm talking to you guys, that's when I kind of think about what I thought about the episode. I might look at a scene and go, okay, that scene was there. What did that mean? Why did they put that there? And oftentimes I'll end an episode not really knowing or understanding how I felt about it, but it's when I sit down and I organize these notes and I think about these scenes that I start having these kind of like epiphanies about what I feel like they were trying to tell me with these scenes. So why the fuck are you telling me this, Mike? Well, the reason I'm telling you this is because when I walked away from this episode, I felt kind of bad about it. I'm like, I don't know if I really liked that episode. I had a lot of problems with it. And it is still the case that I have problems with it, but my remaining problems are small because once I started to organize my notes, I made a connection between, I think, what would be considered kind of like the A plot of this episode and the B plot of this episode. And I felt after I finished watching it, I'm like, I think they want those things to connect, but they're not, or they're connecting too tenuously. But once I started writing my notes and I'm organizing and I'm thinking like, why would they do this? It snapped, and I figured it clicked. It clicked. It didn't snap. It clicked, and I figured out what was going on, and that made me gain a much greater appreciation for the episode. So that was the reason why I told you all that shit. Just to let you know, when I left the episode, I was kind of like, I don't know about that one. I might have to shit on this episode a little bit. And then when I started with my notes, I'm like, okay, I see what they're doing here, and I feel a lot better about it. So that's why I felt like this was a weird episode. It had a couple of bad lines and moments where I feel like they could have done a little bit more work on maybe properly researching what somebody ought to say in these moments. But once I figured out what was happening, because like I said, there was some stuff going on. I'm like, the connective tissue is looking mighty strained here. But once I figured it out, I felt a lot better about it, and I was a lot more impressed with what I think they did in this episode. And figuring that out helped me gain a greater appreciation for the episode as well. So hopefully I can help you all gain that gain that better appreciation as well. Assuming you like it, you very well may not. But I'm going to talk about what the connection that I made, what clicked. But I'm going to save it for the end. And when I say the end, I don't mean like, oh, this is going to make up like the last 5 minutes. No, I'm going to talk about the Toby part of this episode first, and then I'm going to talk about the Libby part of this episode. When I talk about the Libby part, that's where I'm going to talk about what clicked for me in this episode. So, like I said, this episode connects this Vantablack void that we hear about at the beginning to the void left in Toby's life by Rachel. When I'm talking about a void left by Rachel, I don't mean like, oh, my heart is empty and it's missing my wife, and now I feel like there's a void in my heart, a black hole that only Rachel can fill. I don't mean that. I mean the emptiness and the loneliness. This is a man who's accustomed to living with a wife and 2 kids. And in this episode, he finds himself with, obviously, the wife's been gone for a little while, but now the kids are at camp and he's alone and he's struggling with that. Now, this is something that I wouldn't necessarily have problems with. I would have problems with not having my family around. But the actual act of being alone, I'm A-okay with that one. I'd have been fine. But he struggles with it. He tries to hang out with his coworkers, the coworkers from the hospital. And by the way, side note, I said that I think she's like Indian maybe or whatever. Is 2 guys and a girl, right? Whatever, the one girl, I said that I felt like she was into him. I don't know about that anymore. Maybe I was just misreading the way she was looking at him or something. I don't buy that anymore. I'm not sure she's into him. But he tries to hang out with these coworkers. They're busy. Couple have to, I think, some school shit to do. One of them had some other thing. I don't remember. It doesn't fucking matter. So he ends up hanging out with Seth. And he has a wild night that includes like bar hopping, indoor golf, dinner in the dark, which I've done, by the way. It was really cool. And I had like an octopus salad in this dinner in pitch blackness, by the way. I can't remember what else I had, but I had octopus salad, which was kind of a big deal because I love calamari, but it never had octopus. And this was not deep fried octopus. This was like octopus. But it was fire though. Anyway, there's a fake Britney and Justin dance off, and there's a supermodel fight. And for Toby, this is like an epic night. And for Seth, it's just a Monday because Seth's depressed. And he opens up about losing his job at his age and what that's like being, I think he says 41, which is how old I am going to be in about 6 weeks. But he talks about how difficult this is and struggling with having to tell his girlfriend about this and feeling like he can't. And he's just really broken up about it. He doesn't want to talk about it. And I'm going to give thoughts on this later about what this show is doing with the man's experience as far as relationships and breaking up. And I can't quite figure out where they're going to go with this Seth thing where like he lost his job. He's struggling with telling his girl about it. And I have an idea. I'm wondering if maybe however Seth handles this situation with his girl, however he handles this situation, I'm wondering if it's going to be different enough from how Toby handled these similar types of situations with Rachel that Toby will observe this and go and maybe come to a realization like, okay, I see how I fucked up in the ways that I contributed to the dissolution of my marriage. Like maybe he'll see something like that in how he interacted with Rachel. But we'll see. But right now I'm still kind of like not quite sure where we're going with the Seth stuff. But I like the fact that I like when you see a guy doing like meathead shit like that. Like, oh, we're watching supermodels fight. Let's beat our chest and be, I don't know, whatever the fuck he thinks he's being. But then opening up and and showing a little bit more, I don't even want to say showing emotion, but just showing himself to be complex. Like as somebody who is more than just watching supermodels fight. He's a guy that, has a girlfriend that he's, has a very real concern about how he's going to tell this. He's like, I haven't told her all this time. I'm also going to have to deal with the fact that I've lied to her all this time. Like, that's real shit. And I appreciate that from Seth. And I'm really curious how they're going to tie this into the main plot line. But during this same conversation where Seth is talking about everything that's going on with him, we find out that Libby has this trip to Disney World planned with her family. And I'm going to talk about that later in the Libby section, but I did want to point out that this happens in this same conversation. And the Disney World thing, that for whatever reason, they don't mention, they say that within the episode that they don't like Disney being mentioned. Hulu owns Disney. I mean, Disney owns Hulu, so I'm sure it wouldn't have been an issue. But I do have an idea as to, well, I'm not going to try to explain it because I'm not going to remember to come back to this, but when I talk about my revelation about in the Libby section of this video, when I talk about that, remember that I think that's why Disney World isn't mentioned and not some weird thing like, oh, we can't mention Disney World on Hulu. Like, not a thing. Don't worry about it. So after this conversation, Toby goes to see Naheed again. He gets like a nice little massage afterwards, after, you know, the only reason he goes to see her. And she like drips like oil on his back and like writes letters with the oil, and it feels good. It looks like he falls asleep. And he talks about how great it is to be in that moment of happiness and all this good stuff. And then he goes, you know, I guess we're not going to go out to breakfast. And she goes, you know, one Mike was right. I am still actively married to a husband. And she tells this whole story about how this guy got caught getting head from a guy. And he's a very popular right-wing conservative newscaster. Great, very funny scene where Toby multiple times asked if it's Tucker Carlson. I thought that was great. But basically, she arrives at a place where, like, you know, he's a right-wing conservative news anchor. He can't be gay. So that's being suppressed. And I continue to appear with him in public. And that's just what we do. But I'm doing my own thing. He's doing his own thing. But that's why we can't go out in public, which, again, that's what I said. So, anyway, after that, she gives a great line. She says, being divorced doesn't make you any less married. And I love that line. I think that's really deep. And that's something that's interesting because, obviously, I don't know what that's like because I am not divorced. But, like, the idea of being divorced not really changing the state of your life, I think is kind of interesting. And even to the degree that it does, the marriage doesn't go away. So like if you break up with the wife, especially if you have kids, I think that line doesn't apply as much if you have kids with the person. But if you do have kids with the person, there's going to continue to be mother-father interactions. Like, okay, we're getting together for a kid's birthday, or I'm doing something with the kids, but we have to check in with the mom, or the mom's doing something with the kids, she has to check in with the dad. Whatever the case may be, even if, like, okay, say we'll use Toby in this scenario. If Toby starts seeing someone else, you know, trying to be a single person, and he starts seeing someone else, the marriage doesn't go away even though he's divorced. Like, because that's now a woman that might be around his kids, so he kind of has to broach this with the ex. And I just think that's a very profound statement, I think. And I think that that's something that I think maybe you would have had to go through to even arrive at that conclusion. But I don't know. I thought that was a really deep line. I thought it was really good. And like I said, I think if you don't have kids, I think being divorced can make you feel less married, although there are other things that still apply. But if you have kids with the person, like it really does, you can't walk away from it entirely. You can walk away from it metaphorically, but you can't really walk away from it because, well, I'm not going to talk about it, but you guys get it. So we end the episode with Hannah having to get picked up from camp. And she sent some photos. We don't know if they were news. They could have just been something tantalizing, but she sent inappropriate photos to a guy. He shows them to some other people. Hannah gets sent home and nothing is happening to the guy. And I'm going to get into this when I get into the Libby portion of this episode, but this is just more to add on to the misogyny pile that has been created in this episode. And Toby snaps on the counselor, rightfully so, because, you know, he snaps on the counselor. He makes sure that he's called Dr. Fleishman twice. And I thought that was interesting, too, because I talked about earlier how Toby takes mistreatment of the women. I didn't say the women in his life because at the time it was only Rachel, but now it's Hannah, too. He takes mistreatment of the women in his life as an insult to him, and he very much does that here, which I don't fault him for that at all. You know, if he has to defend her if the counselor isn't. And so, like, I'm not saying he's wrong for that. Totally understand. It's just an observation. But, you know, he looks at it like, well, if you're not going to treat my daughter with respect, you're going to treat me with respect. And I get that. But I think it's interesting here in this moment in the moment once he picks her up, that he doesn't reprimand Hannah for taking the picture in the first place. And, you know, we live in a world of, like, you know, victim blaming and all that sort of thing. But I feel like Toby would have done that before. Like at the beginning of the season, Toby would have wagged the finger. How could you do this? Why would you do something that irresponsible? Something like that. And I think it's because subconsciously he's learning and understanding the raw deal that women get. And for us, the viewers of this episode, we get it with the Libby storyline as well. But I think for him, he's kind of starting to come to this realization where, you know, he just spent a night out watching women fight each other for men's entertainment. Like, he knows, I think he's understanding more to be receptive to the issues of women and maybe how he behaves. So when he sees this situation with this counselor, I can't say necessarily taking the boy's side, but showing favoritism toward the boy when the boy should be getting punished as well, you know, that causes Toby to snap. And I get that, and I also like the fact that him not reprimanding Hannah for having taken the picture in the first place, I think shows growth for Toby. So let me see, where I want to go next. I'm wondering if this, I don't want to say he's reached the epiphany yet. I think, because like I said, this isn't directly addressed. This is just an observation that I made because I kind of feel like Toby in episode 1 wouldn't have done this. But I wonder if seeing this behavior, this favoritism toward the boy over his daughter and everything else that he's observed, I wonder if this is going to end up in a situation, and we're talking about, this is tying back into what I was saying about Seth earlier, where he realizes what he did wrong with Rachel, and maybe he apologizes to her for what he did, his contributions to the dissolution of the marriage, but still doesn't actually get back with her. You know, getting that closure, like, we're not meant for each other. I understand that. I should have understood that before. I know this is not meant to be, but I'm sorry for what I did. Peace. Love. We're good. I feel like that's where we're going to end, but we'll see. And that would be a nice way to tie in the Seth stuff. So Toby sees Hannah make eye contact with a kid that's in a group of 3. And when these two make eye contact, she looks away, and Toby's able to piece together that this must be the kid who did that. And he goes up to this kid and calls him a worthless piece of shit, which is funny to me. I don't, like, that's wild. Like, I can't imagine, because if I was in that scenario, I'd have said far worse. But still, I can't, like, someone just walking up to, like, a 12-year-old kid, like, yo, you a piece of shit. You never gonna grow up to be shit, and I hope I'm there when you grow up and you ain't shit. I just think that's funny. But, you know, he has to, because clearly this kid is gonna see no consequences. So this kid needs to learn in some way that what he did was wrong. And I think having a random parent come up to you and call you a piece of shit, that's probably gonna resonate. That's probably gonna resonate with you a little bit. So I like that move on Toby's part. And I feel like, you know, too, even that kid's parent, assuming that kid's parents aren't pieces of shit, they're probably looking at their kid too like, hey, why are you a piece of shit? That parent was right. We didn't raise you to be a piece of shit. They might have. But I'll leave that scene now. So there's a great scene that follows where Toby has to tell the kids about the reality of the situation with Rachel. And it's a really sad scene. You know, it has to be really hard to tell your kids, like, you know, your mom dropped you off and she's probably not ever coming back. That kind of, like, how do I convey your mother abandoned you without making the person feel how you should feel in that circumstance. Like, you have to word it differently so that you don't say that. Because if you say that, it's going to fuck those kids up, man. They're going to have a real hard time with that. So he had to find a different way to say it. And I liked how the way he kind of, like, lightly kind of, like, you know, touched it with very delicate hands and very delicate gloves. And then they get in the car, and kids, man, fucking resilient. I know it from my own kids. They start singing that fucking fight songs thing in the fucking car. They get back, they see the puppy that he had bought earlier in the episode at his house, and it's like, yeah, hey, cool, we have a dog now. And they're, like, sleeping like babies and shit. And it's like, it is, and they say in the narration that Hannah's gonna struggle with this going forward, like this back and forth between how she feels shitty about what her mom did and moving on with her life. But in this moment, that is wild that those kids were told something wildly fucked up like that, and then get in the car and start singing some shit about determination and strength and getting through shitty situations. I thought that was pretty damn impressive of those kids. So, but Toby shows some resilience too. You know, he starts to go see Rachel in the middle of the night. Which is weird, right? It's like, this shit just happened. He's like, yo, I gotta run an errand in the middle of the fucking night. Are you gonna be okay if I leave you here alone after you probably just felt violated by this kid? like, not the best idea, but that's me reading a little bit. That's me going a little bit too far into the scene. The point is, he feels like he has to go confront Rachel. And he goes to her place, or their old place, and he finds out, even from the doorman who makes the same stupid fucking joke again, that she's there. And I'm assuming he's going there presumably to tell this shit show of a mother what her daughter is currently dealing with. And it would probably be great if she had her mother there to support her and talk to her. But instead, you're in here getting your back blown out over beef lo mein. That's probably why he went there. But he stands in front of the door. And he's standing in front of the door, two big black doors that look, I don't know, just like the entryway into the Vantablack exhibit at the museum. And he walks away. And this time, I like this scene because this is different than the first time. The first time, the first time in front of the exhibit, he like ran away in fright. Like, man, that shit's gonna be scary. I'm getting the fuck out of here. This time, though, his walk away, it's not a sign of fear. It's a sign of strength. Like, I'm past this now. And I'm now in a place where I'm accepting the fact it's gonna be me and these kids. Fuck her. I don't need her. I'm gonna handle this. I'm not gonna go and continue to draw this out. It's time for me to move on. So there's a level of strength and maturity in his walk away, and I like juxtaposing that with his I don't want to call it an irrational fear, because I'm sure that exhibit might be pretty fucking scary as we see Solly run out of it later in the episode, at the end of the episode. But it's still a good juxtaposition to standing in front of a black square. In the first instance, he leaves in fright, and in the second instance, he walks away strong. So I thought that was a really good juxtaposition of those two moments. So moving on to the Libby part, this is where I wanted to get to. And I'm going to kind of speed through this because this episode is going on a little bit longer than I would like, this video. But there was a lot of things, like I told you guys at the top, there were things that once I started making my notes, I'm like, yo, I fuck with this. Like, I didn't make the connection with the black doors until I got to the... Well, I made the connection that he was standing in front of black in front of each scene, but the juxtaposition of who he was walking away from it, I didn't make that connection until I started writing, and I'm like, oh, that's dope. So, like I said, I need to get that out so you guys can understand. But I'm gonna try to speed through the Libby part a little bit because this is more of a theory, I guess. But this week we also spent a good third of this episode with Libby getting backstory on essentially how she ended up where she is. Real quick, all season we've seen her kind of neglecting her husband, being kind of a fuck off of a wife, favoring Toby, seeming depressed. This episode we get the backstory on why. So she was a writer for a men's magazine, probably GQ or Esquire. They might have said it wasn't GQ. I don't know, but they dance around it just like they didn't say Disney World. There was probably a cute clue to what magazine it was specifically that I missed. Who fucking cares? Doesn't matter. She's a writer for this men's magazine. She's coming to understand there's a glass ceiling due to being a woman. A guy who's been there for 6 months gets to go to Cuba to do this story on Castro, and she finds out about this on the heels of being told, yo, that story you wrote on Instagram was great. Like, she's writing stories about Instagram, and this guy who's been there for 6 months is writing stories on Castro. But she idolizes another writer for the magazine named Archer Sylvan, who's played by Christian Slater. He wrote the decoupling book that we've seen earlier in the season that Toby has, that she has. That's, mad misogynistic that we learned about as well. He talks of the woman's side of a divorce being dull and how they never tell the whole story. So he decided he was going to write a book telling the man's side of a divorce story that's also undoubtedly boring and not telling the whole story and failing to see the irony in that. But I'm sure that's lost on him. But she realizes she's never going to get a good gig at this magazine. Like, there's clear favoritism toward men, clear, she's only being given like these shitty jobs, and she decides that she needs to quit and she's going to write her own book. And 2 years later, which is now present day, she still hasn't written shit. She's ignoring her family at Disney World and admits it's because of Toby. Now, you remember I mentioned earlier in a previous video that I was like, I wonder if she's struggling with her marriage because she has a thing for Toby. Like, she's focused on Toby and his whole situation, and she's ignoring her husband, and he's clearly getting really upset about it. And again, when I talk about this theory, a lot of the shit that we've seen with Libby, I don't even want to call it a theory. I think that's what this is. I mean, it hasn't been laid out, but I'm like 90% sure. But a lot of that shit's gonna make a lot more sense when I talk about this, because he talks her husband talked about like, oh, it's nice seeing her feeling energized again. And when I give this theory, you're gonna understand why she was in a shit place prior to Toby coming back, and now that Toby's back, she's in a mentally good place, but she's being a shitty wife. And let me see, where am I? Okay, so here's what I think. My theory here is I think this is the point the purpose of the entire series, not this episode, but the entire series. I think the show, Fleishman is in Trouble, is going to be the name of the book that Libby writes now that she's quit her job at this magazine. These 2 years where she hasn't written anything and she doesn't know what to write. I think Toby reappearing with this story about Rachel, the reason she's pulled herself out of whatever funk she was in, the funk was because of the situation at her job and having to quit, but not having written shit in 2 years. Toby coming along with this convenient story about relationships has I think reinvigorated her. She's like, I can write my book about this, about Toby's situation. And I think she's narrating the show because she is reading, she's doing a reading of her book to an audience. Maybe not, at least to us, but this could literally be like at the very last scene of the show, she's gonna be in like a bookstore reading the book to people who are listening, and she's like a big shot or whatever, and she's gonna close the book and it's gonna end and it's gonna be corny. But like that's what I think is probably gonna happen. And she's writing this from the man's perspective on divorce. That's not gonna be the shitty version that Christian Slater's character wrote. So, you know, she said she's thinking about Toby on the vacation. Like, you know, I wasn't thinking about Disney World, I wasn't thinking about Florida. Even now, standing here, I'm not thinking about unpacking his car. All I'm thinking about is Toby. And like I said, before, I'm thinking it's like, does she have a thing for Toby? And that's why she's being shitty to her husband and focused on Toby? No! She's eating this up, every word he says, because this is all going in her fucking book. And she's thinking about his situation and how it can be integrated into this novel. You know, Archer's book, Christian Slater's character, was about divorces and how we hear the women's side, and it's always slanted toward them. But then he writes his own slanted, one-sided book and doing the same thing he's accusing women of doing as a man, right? But Libby, she's gonna write the book about a man's perspective of a divorce, but a version with depth and a version of substance. And she comments in the episode, she says something like, people don't even read my shit unless it's about a man. Here you go. Now she's writing a story about a man from a man's perspective, and that can be it. Like, you know, oh, it's about a man. She can pull in people who are gonna read it. It's written from the man's perspective. Well, it's not written from. It's written about the man from a woman's perspective, but as a third-party observer. And I think that's unique, and I think that's interesting. So I think that's pretty cool, and I think that's the connection between the two plots that I thought was kind of thin while I was watching it. So when I said at the beginning, how when I stopped the episode, I was like, I felt like there's some stuff that didn't really connect. I was wondering, like, what the fuck was the point of the Libby stuff? Like, how is that, like, what is that supposed to mean for me? But now that, like once I started doing my notes and shit, I'm like, yo, like, it clicked. The light bulb came on. I'm like, she's writing this fucking book. That the name of the show is the name of her book. She's be reading all that shit. It all flooded in. I'm just like typing, like, I got it now. So that's what I think is gonna happen here. So I'm gonna close with a couple of quick thoughts, and that'll be it. And I'll be wrapping up just in time. A couple of quick thoughts. The scene at the bar where people were chanting for Archer to read his book felt mad unrealistic. Have you ever seen a crowded bar of people chanting for an author to read an excerpt of his book? You ain't never seen no shit like that. Come on. And I know I normally say I award extra points for I ain't never seen no shit like that. No, I'm docking points for that. Ain't nobody chanting to hear a fucking book about divorce in the middle of the bar. Fuck out of here, man. Then this line really irritated me. Libby's narration during her portion, she goes, "That night I reread Arthur's collection." No, you didn't. Stop fucking lying. You probably read one chapter. You didn't read nobody's whole fucking whole history of writing overnight. Like, why would you say that? And she's like, gets into bed with Adam, and she's like, yeah, I was reading this book, and I got to this part. I'm like, she's making see. When she said it, they panned across like a bookshelf of like 15 books and shit. Like, don't tell me that night you started to. Like, I'm like, who the fuck wrote that line? Speaking of who the fuck wrote that line, Toby takes the dog out, and the dog takes a shit the dog takes a shit, but that's not what I want to talk about. He takes it out, and this woman walks by, and she's like, "Oh, that's a cute dog. What's her name?" He's like, "Well, it's a boy, but you know, it's sometimes people think it's a girl, but it's fine." She's like, "What's the name?" His name's Bubbles. And she's like, "Oh, baby, that's why people think it's a girl dog." No, you stupid fuck. Nobody looks at a dog and goes, "That dog's named Bubbles. It must be a girl." It doesn't have a sign that says my name is Bubbles. Nobody. Like, people don't know just by looking at it that it has a girl name. Like, and again, I'm right. That's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. Who the fuck wrote that line? Like, that would piss me off if somebody said that to me. Like, oh, Bubbles, that must be why people think it's a girl. Yeah, because they telepathically know the dog's name and then they assign a gender to it. Shut the fuck up. No, that was so stupid. Also stupid. Why would a camp call a parent and tell them to pick up their kid but not tell them the reason why? I'd have fucked shit up when I got to that camp. I'd have fucked shit up. What? That was ridiculous, and it was not worth the almost certain reason of just wanting to spring what Hannah did on us in the scene. Like, you could have done that by, like, what did she do? And then we don't hear the person on the phone. He's like, oh my God, okay. I'll be there. I'm on my way. And we're like, oh shit, what happened? Something fucked up happened. But him just like, you're not gonna tell me what happened? Okay, I guess I'll be on the way. Like, what? Like, I don't even know what to feel about it. And you telling me that she's getting kicked out for sending news to a boy and he can't say that over the phone? Oh my goodness, that'll fuck me up. And lastly, I want to close with one comment. When Libby gets her book autographed by Arthur, who is Christian Slater's character, he says, what's your name? She says, Libby Slater. Are you kidding me? Her character has the same name as the actor of the person he was talking to. That's weird. It made me even wonder, like, is this such an inside joke that, why am I blanking on her name? And I love the actress. I don't know why I'm blanking on her name right now. But it made me wonder if the actress was married to Christian Slater. She's not. So I will see you guys next week for episode 6. And until then, peace.